Episode 19, This Woman is a Nuisance. Natalie did not sleep at all the entire night. So when she came to the hotel the next day, there were dark circles under her eyes. She still didn't have Liam. Without him, she felt like she was going to go crazy. Today, she vowed that no matter what, she would sneak into that room and get him. When the hotel manager saw how early she had arrived, he had a whole new level of respect for her. She was indeed a hard-working young woman. "A few days ago, another employee left us, so you'll be taking their place on the top floor. The most important guests are up there. You must make sure that you do not upset them, all right?" The supervisor motioned Natalie to follow him. The reason Natalie was given all these instructions was that the former worker had made a mistake that had upset the VIP guests in the presidential suite. And after seeing Natalie's determination towards her work, the manager did not want her to leave the job too. The manager took her upstairs, and before he left, he reminded her, "If you don't have anything to do in the corner room, don't go in there. If you upset that guest, we'll be ruined." Natalie nodded quickly. In her mind, she saw Bryce's furious eyes and felt a lingering fear. It was no trouble for her to avoid his room as instructed, and she was about to go to the next room when the elevator dinged. Someone was coming. Natalie dodged around the corner, peeked out, and saw Cheryl walking toward the door of the room she had been about to enter. She got extremely excited. Now she was even more sure that Liam was in that room. While she was thinking of a plan, two burly men walked out of the room, but Liam was nowhere to be seen. "Where's the child? How has he disappeared?" Anger was written all over Cheryl's face. If the boy could not be found, she would lose her hold over Natalie. The two bodyguards shivered as they recalled the cold eyes of the man from last night. They didn't dare to tell her the truth, so they made up a story. "The brat smashed everything in the room, and while we were tidying up, he took advantage of the chaos to escape." The bodyguards lowered their heads. "Useless! If you can't even take care of a child, what's the point of having you?" Cheryl was angry and her face turned red. She stretched her hand out to teach them a lesson. After hearing that Liam had been lost, Natalie moved without thinking. She ran right up to the two bodyguards to interrogate them. "What? You said that Liam has disappeared? My child is missing because you kidnapped him. This is kidnapping. I'm going to call the police." She was almost completely blinded by rage. She took out her cell phone and started to dial the police. If she could, she would have given Cheryl a slap hard enough to knock her senseless, but she was too worried about Liam and couldn't care about anything else just then. A trace of panic flashed across Cheryl's face when she saw Natalie dialing 911, and she quickly gave her subordinates a look. At her command, the two bodyguards held Natalie down, snatched her phone, and ended the call. Only then did Cheryl's anxious heart calm a little. If the police came and news spread about how they had taken Liam, the Davidsons' reputation would be tarnished for good. "Cheryl, give me my phone back!" Natalie glared furiously at her younger sister. At that moment, she wanted nothing more than to tear her into 1,000 pieces, but she was unable to move. "Sis, don't worry. How far can a child go? He'll be back soon, don't you think?" Since Nick wasn't here, Cheryl couldn't be bothered to continue pretending. She looked right at her and gloated. She didn't care about where Natalie's son had gone. What she cared about was that no one could stop her now. "Cheryl, I'm going to find Liam. If you keep doing this, you will be punished." Cheryl's attitude lessened a little when she thought about Liam. The most important thing was to have control over Natalie, and that was only possible until they kept Liam captive. Natalie was on the verge of panicking. No one could understand how anxious she was. Every second felt like torture to her. Seeing this, Cheryl suddenly felt a great sense of satisfaction. She walked slowly over to her with a twisted look of glee in her eyes. "Although the child is lost, why are you still here? Isn't it Bryce's responsibility to find out his whereabouts? If he really is your son's father and you are his child's mother, he would have rescued your Liam way earlier." Cheryl waved her hand to signal her subordinates to take Natalie away, her eyes gleaming. "Let me go! It wouldn't be good for you if Bryce finds this out." Natalie knew she had no business with Bryce. Telling the truth to Cheryl would only risk her son's life, and that was the last thing she wanted to do. So she lied to Cheryl about Bryce and her relationship with him, but it seemed like Cheryl wasn't bothered by her threats. No matter how hard Natalie struggled, Cheryl remained unmoved. In the end, she got annoyed and had her men put their hands over her mouth to stop her from talking. Finally, struggling and whining frantically, Natalie was taken away. Bryce didn't sleep well. The child had been buried in his arms all night, trying to hug him, and this had given him a headache. It seemed the little guy couldn't wait for morning. He woke up very early and looked at Bryce's phone eagerly.
"Dad, why hasn't Mom called me back?"
He pouted and looked at Bryce with an aggrieved expression. Bryce was also a bit confused. He had seen Natalie's eagerness to find Liam yesterday. Surely it would be impossible for her to remain silent for so long. Liam started to nudge his hand and act like a spoiled child again, which made Bryce upset. He immediately called for his men. "Go out and find where the woman is." Not long after, they returned with pictures on their phone. "We found out from a surveillance camera that Miss Davidson was taken away by these people. This is Miss Davidson's sister." Bryce squinted his eyes dangerously. It seemed that Natalie's family was indeed complicated. When Liam saw the picture, he cried,
"Daddy, Mommy was taken away by a bad person. What should we do? What should we do?"
The little guy was really worried. As he cried, he hugged Bryce's arm, tears and snot running down his face. Bryce looked helplessly at him. Once, he might have pushed him away due to his obsession with cleanliness. But when he looked at the boy, he became soft-hearted once again. Even the bodyguards, who were standing to one side, were surprised when they saw their boss soften. How could he be in such a good mood?
"Daddy, Mommy's been taken away by those bad guys. They will definitely bully her. Go and save Mommy, please."
Liam was tired from crying. He raised his head and looked at the man in front of him, begging him with his eyes. In the past, Bryce would never have allowed someone to challenge his authority so often. But looking at the little boy's teary eyes, his heart ached. He gritted his teeth. Ugh, this woman was really a nuisance. Episode 20. You Don't Deserve Him. Natalie's head was covered by a cloth which shrouded her in darkness. She had thought that she might be taken to a remote place. As time passed, she became more and more anxious. She used all her strength to kick at the door with her unbound feet, but it didn't budge an inch. After struggling for a long time, there was finally some movement at the door, and a few big men who looked like bodyguards opened it and pulled off her hood. Natalie's eyes adjusted to the light, and she glared at the woman in front of her. She found that she was in Davidson Mansion. She tried to pull free from her restraints, her face red with anxiety. Cheryl snorted coldly when she saw this and simply looked at her with disdain. "Struggling is useless. There are people everywhere. You won't be able to run away. I think you should just wait for Bryce to come and save you. You two are together, after all. If he really likes you, he won't ignore you, right?" Cheryl's eyes flashed with jealousy. She suddenly couldn't stand the thought of Bryce saving this woman. He was such a fine man. A woman like her didn't deserve him. Natalie frowned as she thought about how she had angered Bryce yesterday and started recalling everything that she had thought while she was being held captive in the hotel. Her expression turned even uglier as she thought about how Liam was missing and how she had been kidnapped. Noticing the subtle change in her expression, Cheryl's eyebrows lifted, and she snorted with a malicious smile. "What's wrong with you?" She looked again at Natalie's expression and suddenly felt suspicious about something. "Wait, were you acting all this time? Were you lying when you said you were with Bryce? Were you lying to us?" Cheryl's pretty, delicate face became distorted with jealousy. Now, she no longer looked like a lady from a noble family. "Huh? Of course it's true," Natalie sneered. Her eyes became increasingly cold as she looked at Cheryl, and she tried to look confident. "He might be trying to find me, and when he does, you won't be able to take the consequences." Cheryl believed this. "All right, sister. We'll wait and see." As she finished speaking, she waved behind her, and two burly men appeared again and started dragging Natalie inside the Davidson house. Natalie couldn't understand why they were doing so and wanted herself to be free so that she could find Liam. At that moment, she was only concerned about Liam. He was still missing, so why would she care about anything else? Although he was very smart, he had just arrived here and didn't know anyone. What if something happened? What should she do? In a moment of desperation, she begged Cheryl to let her go. But Cheryl remained unmoved. In fact, she felt even more pleased with herself. While Cheryl was walking away, Natalie saw a figure passing by Cheryl and immediately recognized the man. Tom walked over. He didn't even look at Natalie, but instead asked Cheryl, "What's going on?" Cheryl was still very afraid of her father. She lowered her head and told him the whole story without hiding anything. Of course, she also told him about losing Liam. Tom nodded. He didn't have much of an expression, but it was obvious that he was worried as he instructed the bodyguards, "Watch her carefully. Don't make any more mistakes." As for Liam's whereabouts, Tom didn't mention it. His grandson's life didn't matter to him at all. Natalie looked at her family's faces and felt disheartened. Her heart, which held no hope, ached uncontrollably. It was said that blood is thicker than water, but now her child was gone, and they were indifferent. They only cared about their business, and they would keep her locked up so that she couldn't go looking for him. Only her family could be so heartless. Natalie was filled with hatred, and she wanted to get out of the place as soon as possible. She used all her strength to ram into the two men who were holding her back, trying to find a chance to escape, but she was not strong enough, and soon they had a hold of her again. Tom and the others looked at Natalie in confusion when they saw the commotion. "Liam is lost, but you guys only care about yourselves. If anything happens to him, even if I die, I'll take you all to hell with me," Natalie roared in despair. But it didn't shake her family's cold hearts. "Go ahead and do whatever you want. You won't be able to leave until Bryce agrees to be my business partner." With a snort, Tom turned his back on her and left, not a trace of emotion in his eyes. Natalie was locked up in her room. She had no way to escape, and this made her anxiety skyrocket. Outside, Cheryl's mother came over when she heard the commotion. Seeing that Natalie was being held, a flash of joy appeared on her face, but her attention shifted to Tom, who was standing there with a sullen look on his face. Quickly, she tried to comfort him. "Tom, don't be angry. I see that this girl is so much trouble that Bryce hasn't even bothered to come for her yet. They probably don't have a relationship at all, and she lied to us. Evan Wilson isn't so bad, although he is a bit old and also divorced, but he has a lot of assets. If she marries him, it will help us a lot." Tom nodded. He had just started to relax a little when Cheryl added, "Yeah, Dad. How could a man like Bryce be with her anyway? I think we got it wrong." Hearing that, Tom's expression turned sour again, and Cheryl felt secretly happy. She wanted her father to hate Natalie. Anyway, to her it was impossible that Natalie could be with someone like Bryce. She should be grateful to be married to an old man. She thought this even though everyone knew that Mr. Wilson was an awful person. In fact, his two previous wives had divorced him for domestic violence. While this was going on in the Davidson household, the news was out that the CEO of the Claire Group, Bryce, had been at a hotel with a child. Many people assumed that the child was his illegitimate son.